At the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina was one of the richest countries in the world. Its GDP per capita was as high as that of Canada and France. Venezuela later obtained the same prosperity. From the 1950s to the early 1980s, it became the most flourishing country in South America. Its GDP per capita had already exceeded that of Canada and Australia. Unfortunately, their success was not able to endure the test of time. As the world entered into the 21st century, Latin America was no longer the dreamland of immigrants and investors. This left us with one question. What occurred in these tumultuous years that contributed to the economic debacle in Latin America? First, these once booming Latin American countries were overly dependent on exporting their natural resources. The period between 1870 to 1914 was known as the export age for Latin American countries. In 25 years, Argentina gained a 7.5-fold growth in GDP due to its expanding exports of livestock and agricultural commodities to European countries. Its prosperity attracted British and French investments, along with many eager immigrants. As the disposable income and quality of life of Argentines increased, they started demanding much higher levels of consumer products. As a country dependent on exporting natural resources, Argentina was not industrialized to produce a wide range of consumer products. This caused domestic consumers of Argentina to increase their demand for imported goods. Rising imports resulted in the depreciation of pesos and increasing inflation that caused the Argentine economy to succumb to a severe recession. Like Argentina, the under-industrialized Venezuela was also a country that relied heavily on one sole export: oil. When global economic growth started to decelerate in the 21st century, the demand for oil quickly declined. Moreover, natural gas supply became more abundant in North America and quickly transitioned to being the largest source of electricity generation in the United States. This caused the demand for oil in Venezuela to further decrease, halting its economic growth. Second, corruption was rampant within Latin American countries such as Ecuador, Colombia, Venezuela, and Argentina. In these countries, government officials were in control of infrastructure and banking systems. As citizens' taxes and payments for utilities enter the wallets of corrupted government officials, less monetary resources are available to be invested in ameliorating basic education, infrastructure, and property rights protection. A less educated population and a less developed nation all contributed to the decline of Latin American economic growth. Third, many Latin American countries were sufferers of debt crises due to overconfidence of the government and under-industrialization. During their prosperous years, Latin American countries such as Venezuela were accumulating large amounts of government debt to finance their elections. To win against the opponent, political parties would issue higher levels of social welfare to the citizens in order to gain their votes. Sadly, the Venezuelan government did not expect the worldwide oil price to drop. This event resulted in their inability to repay the enormous debt by exploiting their oil reserves. Under-industrialization also fueled the debt crises. Without manufacturing industries, Latin Americans did not have stable employment or income. This resulted in their high reliance on social welfare programs to survive, which motivated the government to borrow more debt. The failure of Latin American governments to repay their foreign debt thus impeded their economic growth. Lastly, the saving rate of Latin America was significantly lower than that of East Asian countries since the 1970s. This is mainly due to the more conservative tradition of the Eastern culture that promotes saving.
Don't spend!
Versus the more liberal tradition of the Western culture that promotes spending. With a lower saving rate, there would be less investment in capital, which causes Latin American economic growth to decline, in contrast to the unprecedented growth in East Asia. There are many other factors that resulted in the economic debacle in Latin America besides the four factors we focused on. These factors may include international sanctions which occurred during the Venezuelan crisis, political conflicts such as the Falklands War between Argentina and Britain, or illegal activities of drug cartels that promoted outrageous gun violence in Colombia and Mexico. However, with the current liberalizing economy in countries like Brazil, Latin America may still succeed in its slower-than-average economic recovery.